Within MCBK, we are encouraging our library community to become active partners in our efforts toward mobilizing biomedical knowledge and ensuring that our shared values of keeping information available and accessible to current researchers, scientists, scholars, and future generations are sustained. Less than a year ago, members of the MCBK Health Equity and Access to Learning Work Group published a call to action in the Journal of the Medical Library Association. This article emphasizes that to advance towards states of improved health equity, health information professionals need to engage in and encourage the conduct of research at the intersections of health equity, health disparities, and computable biomedical knowledge applications. And it also, the article provides a set of recommendations for action. The link is posted in the chat if you would like to read the article in full. And I just want to say, many colleagues from that HEAL group who participated in producing that call to action are attending today. They're participants today, and Jerry Perry, Deborah Swain, Josh Rubin, Gabe Rios, and I'm sorry if I'm leaving anybody out. Feel free to chime in and chat and say that you were part of it, but I appreciate the effort that went into that call to action. Now, if we can move on to the next panel that we have today. We have a group of librarians from across the country, from Vanderbilt, UVA, and New Mexico. And these librarians are leading the way in many efforts relevant to our conference themes. So today we're going to be delighted to hear from these three colleagues who are leaders in championing ways that librarians can have an impact at the intersection of AI, learning health systems, and libraries. We have with us Laura Hall, who serves as the division head for resources, archives, and discovery at the University of New Mexico Health Sciences Library and Informatics Center. In this role, she leads initiatives that support education, research, and patient care, with a particular emphasis on the stewardship and development of the library's collections. She developed and hosts AI Crossroads, a community of practice, a monthly open forum that fosters collaborative learning among Health Sciences Center faculty and staff to navigate the rapidly evolving landscape of generative AI. And she is serving as co-principal investigator for a study on generative AI in higher education, as well as serving as principal investigator of an exploratory ChatGPT study examining the local impact of AI on teaching, learning, and research practices. We also have with us Bart Ragon. Bart Ragon is the director of the Claude Moore Health Sciences Library at the University of Virginia. His work focuses on developing innovative methods to support the research life cycle, emphasizing the integration of library services through advanced support for software tools that facilitate data acquisition, manipulation, analysis, and discovery. Bart's professional interests include promoting reproducibility and replicability in science, advancing open access models for federally funded research, and providing instructional support for scientific automation tools. Bart has published in the areas of clinical translational science and the political economy of federally sponsored data. Philip Walker is the director of the Annette and Irwin Eskind Family Biomedical Library and Learning Center at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, and he's currently enrolled in a doctorate in health informatics program at the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston. Mr. Walker is also an adjunct faculty member of the Vanderbilt School of Nursing with research interests pertaining to the information needs and information seeking behavior of the health sciences community, biomedical and health informatics, knowledge translation, evidence-based practice, and information ecology. So welcome, presenters, and I will turn it over to Bart Ragon, who will be our first presenter.
All right. Let's see if I Figure out how to share a screen. All right. Is everybody seeing a slide deck? Yeah. Okay, good. All right. So as well as working at the Health Sciences Library here at UVA, I also have a pretty significant role with our CTSA Institute, which is the Integrated Translational Health Research Institute of Virginia. It's not just UVA, it involves a variety of partners and collaborators, but I think some of the value that I might be able to bring to this conversation today is really about the synergies or that overlap, that Venn diagram, if you will, of what do libraries do and how do libraries support, information resource needs, that kind of thing, as well as how does a translational science institute sort of connect with, better patient care and health equity and things like that. So that's my angle in looking at all this, and see if I can, there we go, advance my slides. So I am literally the person that went to a learning health system conference last year because I wanted to know what learning health systems were. And part of that is because we don't have a department of learning health systems here at UVA. Now, what I learned is a lot of what we do, we just call it something different. A lot of that work kind of comes out of our quality office. But since I work with our iThrive unit, as well as, iThrive obviously very integrated with learning health systems and things like that, I wanted to learn more. So I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, so forgive me if this is very basic, but really these notes are kind of for me. So as I've learned about learning health system, it really is sort of figuring out that translation of that research findings into patient care. Well, guess what? Libraries really care about these things, and we really want to support these things. Embedding clinical research into evidence-based care practice, into the delivery of care. I think almost every health sciences library in this country would argue or say that they support these type of activities and are really passionate about it. As everybody knows, implementing a learning health system is complex. And for us, that's even a little bit more complex than maybe institutions or translational science institutes where you have, one hospital, one learning health system, one CTSA, that kind of thing. For us, since we have multiple health systems involved, it just adds a layer of complexity to how we think about a learning health system and how libraries and AI and things like that relate to it. We know that learning health systems can enable innovation and support that continuous quality improvement. Again, that's kind of our angle at UVA. When we came back, we have a quality office, and we realized it's like, oh, our library's been supporting this for a number of years in a variety of ways. And then lastly, it requires participation and resources from a wide range of stakeholders. This includes your healthcare leaders, your clinical providers, your patients, payers, researchers, and then the part I added is librarians, because I think librarians are really important to this overall process in a variety of ways. So the other model I like is this AHRQ model, but mainly because it's simple and I like to think of things very simply. So it's data and it's evidence and it's practice or practice change. If you like models, there's plenty of them out there. So you feel free to dig into these. And what I like about these models is they all sort of share, similar aspects of what they do, but they are geared in a way that allows either the individual entity to kind of think about how they approach learning health systems, or to think about it in different contexts and things like that. For me personally, I really like this Kaiser Permanente model. I like the fact that it's broken down into these columns of input, outputs, and outcomes, and that really, for me, helped me kind of figure out how do I think about it personally as a librarian, but also how do we think about it in the context of iThrive? And I'll show you my version of this model here in a few slides. But what I want to describe to you now is a little bit about who iThrive is. So like I said, iThrive is, we really consider ourselves a state organization. We have UVA, which is centrally located in the state of Virginia. We also have, as part of our partners, is the Virginia Tech Carilion system. And if you don't know anything about Virginia, we're kind of centrally located, and we have ties to the northern part of the state in that DC area. Virginia Tech Carilion has a different population base, a different patient base, different schools and different things like that into what's known as the Virginia Tech Carilion. And so that involves Virginia Tech, but also the Carilion health system. And so this is really sort of, when I talked about the complexity of thinking about a learning health system for iThrive, this is the complex part, right? Like you can imagine that UVA is not going to tell VTC or Virginia Tech Carilion how they should, operate their learning health system. They know what their priorities are. They know their patients well better than we do, and things like that, and vice versa. What we want to build in iThrive is a mechanism and a means for people to connect with the resources that they need. And again, I'll show you. I want to make sure. Okay, yeah, that's on the next slide. I'll tell you more about that in the next slide. The other thing that I just want to highlight is we have these amazing collaborators. And again, thinking from a statewide context, we have Virginia State University, which is an HBCU. We have the Virginia Department of Health as one of our collaborators. We have the Virginia Cooperative Extension as one of our collaborators. All of, those two in the middle, sort of, they help us cover that state and understand what the statewide needs are. We also have the Center for Open Science, which is an international organization. They just happen to be located here in Charlottesville, Virginia. And it's just a wonderful organization, sort of concerned with reproducibility and replicability and things like that. And so they're just another one of our amazing collaborators. So that's iThrive. As we kind of think about learning health systems, the real point is to not create one learning health system to rule them all. It's like, how do we support learning health systems in the state of Virginia, if that makes sense? So here's my version of the Kaiser Permanente model. One thing that I did is I matched the colors to the blocks, right? So as I've thought about this, iThrive coming in from that left-hand side is, the resource sort of aspect of this. Of course, we're going to have inputs. Again, we have an EHR, electronic health record here at UVA. Virginia Tech's going to have their own version. There are other forms of data that we're all aware of. It could be, the social drivers of health. It could be community research. It could be how do we identify those disparities in healthcare in the state of Virginia by working with our collaborators and partners and so forth. And then the outputs can be institution specific, or they could be tools that we develop that anybody can use, and you just use your data, right? So we can help people harmonize data. We can help people create data visualization so you can understand, what the issue is, what the challenges are, and then how the mitigation strategies might come to sort of produce those better outcomes. We might develop informatics tools. We're building a health data research exchange right now, which is a place where you can put data. It can be in a protected environment. You can process the data, get your answer, and then be able to use that in, informing that practice change and stuff like that. And that's really sort of the last outcome, here. It's like, what do we want to do? We want to improve health. We want we want health equity throughout the state. We want to influence policy in ways that produce good practice changes, but also, just those better outcomes for the state and the patients. What I want to say about the Research Concierge Portal, which you'll see down there in the links down there in the bottom, you can go to this website and take a look. It's a warehouse of resources. And what I really like about the portal is you can see it as just an observer from the outside. But if I log in, it provides to me the general resources that are available to anyone. But then it also provides specific information that may be, let's say I'm a clinical researcher, specific to my role at UVA. And so I might be connected through the portal as a UVA clinical researcher with UVA library resources, or they could be from our research data capture group, the people that run REDCap, or they could be the BIRD or the bio, the informatics people, or the people that do the statistics and epidemiology and things like that. If I was a Virginia Tech Carilion researcher, I would log in, I would see those same general resources, but now I might see my library and connect with my librarians or my other data scientists or statisticians or other people and so forth. So it really is kind of a wonderful resource to kind of walk into the door, but then be surrounded by the resources that are more specific to your needs and to the environment that you have to be working in. And that's how we kind of think about that learning health systems, that we're providing that data to inform healthcare decisions, but we're providing it in context of who the person is and what they're trying to achieve and where they sit in the whole process. So this Venn diagram right here is really just to sort of explain that as a researcher, or as a clinician, or as a community member, you don't have to know where the resources are. You may come at the system, you may start with iThrive, and it may be a library resource and you're directed that way. Or you may start in the health system and then you think you go to iThrive, and then iThrive kicks you back to the library. The library says, no, we can't help you with REDCap, but we know who can help you. So the point is, it's like the relationships matter here. And the more that we know about the resource environment overall, the more we can reduce the burden of the practitioner in getting what they need so that they can produce the best care to the patient. Like, they're the ones in the best position to sort of improve health. What we want to do is to reduce their barriers to give them access to what they need so that they can go off and do really good things when it comes to patient care. AI is definitely part of this. I think my library, we're trying to figure this out. We're definitely working in this space in a variety of ways, but to be quite frank, like, we're trying to figure this out. So we have right now we have an innovation arc. So we have a strategic plan that sort of arcs over the library, and we're thinking about innovation. And, we're looking at things like, what's the difference between Copilot Chat and Copilot M360, like embedding it in an Office suite versus just going to a chat tool. And we're trying to figure out, how do we arrange our information sources so that we can leverage the power of AI to sort of reduce the burden on our own staff internally. In other words, we could take all the meeting minutes from every committee in the library and then produce like an executive summary every week of what's going on in the library without having to go to 12 different places. The other thing we've done is we had a request around biographies, and I know this isn't really learning health system related, but what we found was, if you gave it like a CV or a resume or something like that, it could parse through that pretty good and give you a decent biography. It didn't know historical context, so it doesn't remove the burden of having like a historian kind of understand, how do you place this person in terms of history. But the other thing that it did that was quite bad was, if you gave it like an article written about this person, it would plagiarize the heck out of it and really kind of set up a liability situation that you didn't want to put stuff out on the open internet. And so you have to be really, really careful there. And so we kind of backed away from that project. In terms of our patrons, we're doing things like this week, one of our data scientists, we have 2 of those in our library, taught a workshop on best practices in generative AI. Likewise, they are also teaching people how to use it coding in appropriate ways, with R and Python and things like that. There's a tendency of people to want to just plug it in there and assume it's giving you good results or it's efficient. Our data scientists are now teaching people how to use it in good ways. Likewise, we also have our School of Medicine library liaison is developing a critical appraisal. Libraries do this. Like, we help people read an article and understand the level of the evidence and how far you can trust this. Now we're starting to build in a process where we can teach people, how do you trust AI? How do you know that you have good resources? What do you need to check? And how do you give a good prompt and things like that? And then the last thing is just considering, where does fairness and ethics fit in all this? I mean, I think we all know that AI can hallucinate, or that it's a black box and you don't know what's in a large language model, and whether or not that model is good for the question that you're trying to answer. And so we're trying to, as information professionals, trying to help our users who want to use these tools understand how they should be using them at this state and time here in 2025. And then lastly, I just kind of want to mention this article that we produced. This is about 25 librarians last fall produced this article at the Journal of Clinical Translational Science, and it's about 20 some odd librarians from 20 some odd institutions. What I really want to say here, and I want to encourage everybody, whether you are a researcher or a research administrator or you're a librarian, the part of this article is to take the translational science funding announcement and to map what libraries do to help people understand how libraries can support translational science. You see the AI stuff down there highlighted, but what I want to mention is, since this is 20 some odd librarians, this is all things that libraries do, but not all libraries do the same things, right? So my library, we do X, Y, and Z. What we want to do is to be able to go and interface with a researcher and say, hey, what do you need? Here are sort of a menu of services that we do. Or reverse that and have like a researcher or a research administrator saying, hey, here's what I need or what we need. What does your library do, or what can your library do that might support this? And we really feel like this type of menu a la carte model is a great way to start a conversation between libraries and translational science institutes and learning health system departments and quality offices and things like that about what resources and services are really available, because libraries are stronger when we're sort of making other people's work stronger as well. We're supporting the work that needs to be done. And so just lastly, I just want to thank some of the people in my library, Dr. David Martin, Brenna Kent, Allison Cruz, and David Moody, who do a lot of the work that I'm talking about. And then also iThrive, which is a really important organization and really value the partnership that my library has with iThrive. So with that, I will shut up and I will turn it over to one of my colleagues. Nancy, I assume we're doing questions at the end, but correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct. Thank you. Questions at the end. People can be writing questions in chat now if they would like, but we'll take them at the end.
All right. All right. Well, are y'all seeing the slide presentation? I'm working on 3 monitors and I have no idea which ones. I was looking for my green box around which one of these screens. But I'll
Yes, we're
take your word for
seeing.
it.
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, just thank you, Josh and Nancy. I can't say enough gratitude about this opportunity, and Chuck and the Michigan team as well for keeping this movement going. So my name is Philip Walker from Vanderbilt University, and going with the theme of AI libraries and learning health systems, I'm going to be specifically talking about generative AI, similar in to what I think it was Dr. Dorr who mentioned about generative AI and insights. And this was, I had no idea what he was talking about, but I'm so glad we were able to really blend day 1 and day 2. So I'm going to be talking about synthesizing information artifacts for administrative. Also, as I was thinking on the drive into work today, there's an evaluative component here. There's and also a strategic component here as well, that with some of the efforts that I've been working on in our learning healthcare platform. So just to reiterate the definition of learning healthcare, we're looking at that science and informatics incentives and culture being aligned for continuous improvement, innovation. I like to also think of, at least from the 8 years I've been involved with LHS here, that
Hey,
it's
Philip?
yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. I think we're seeing your slide view that doesn't advance as you go through the slides. So it's got the,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Let's see if we can reshare. All right, because that's the one that's on. Let's see if this one works better. All right.
That's the one that shows you the slide that's coming next, but probably works.
No,
That
no,
works.
that works.
Yes.
That works. Okay. All right. So just reiterating definition, I like to think from my 8 years of experience with learning health systems here, that it's really about sciences, because we've got, I mean, between biomedical, we've got cognitive science, implementation science, social sciences, as well, and of course, information science, and data science. And how do we do that? I love what one of the first articles that was put out from the Vanderbilt platform was that learning healthcare systems helps us improve how we care for patients while we are taking care of them. And we do that here. Yes, there was a robust infrastructure here, hospital epidemiology, surveillance, and monitoring. But the approach that we took here was related to pragmatic clinical trials. And that is, for anyone who's new to that, defined by the Mayo Clinic proceedings in 2023, a spectrum of trials with design elements that closely resemble how patients are treated in clinical practice and are intended to evaluate how treatments affect outcomes. So that's been our approach here. And what that does is that we bring together a team similar to an IRB almost, where we can evaluate study methodologies and try to incorporate learning healthcare into the medical center. And actually, I should have advanced the slide with that. So, yes. So how does this platform work? So with the 8 steps here, an investigator has an idea, submits a REDCap survey, the application is reviewed. And then once we have an application, we have what's called an LHS workshop. which is kind of that interdisciplinary team of people who look at methodology, um, ethics, uh, waiver of consent, which is the ideal study methodology, and uh, informatics folks are represented, biostatistics are represented as well. And then from there, after that workshop, there's a summary. Sometimes we may have to have another workshop, or some revisions may be done outside of the workshop environment. Some investigators have had to do what's called a studio, whether it's biostatistics or sometimes informatics, if there was some sort of a build required. And then from there, it comes down to the executive committee review, which is also multidisciplinary, but a little larger than the workshop group. And then from there, what we do at the executive level is we will approve it so that the study can go forth. Now, here is where, in my initial discussions with some of the directors, is where I saw opportunity, and which I'm hoping that my colleagues around the country can also see opportunity. Because within this process, within the platform, are many artifacts that come about. And as you can see, just from the application itself, which at level number 2, which is where I'm going to demonstrate some of the generative AI examples. And then from there, by the time we do the workshop and the comments from the workshop, and then also whatever feedback we have pending approval or to resubmit, as well as the material that comes from the study itself, and then finally the publication. So there's a lot of opportunities here to be able to look at from an administrative realm, as I mentioned, looking at evaluating the different steps within the Learning Health Systems platform, trying to also collate. So as we go through a workshop and we determine whether or not a particular methodology, can we randomize the clinical providers or the practitioners, or do we randomize the patients? Do we do a step wedge? All kind of things that come about from those discussions, and to be able to determine whether or not this fits a learning healthcare mission and goal. And also to be able to look at the publications that come about from this, which I find to be very interesting, and to be able to see the development of the process through the final product. And also,
Philip,
yes,
sorry, excuse me.
yes.
I think it's a little hard to see the text in the slide just based on the view.
Yeah. Okay.
If you're possibly able to go to display settings. If you want, I can also share the slides for you. I have no problem doing that.
Okay, that's fine. I'm actually, I think I only have about 3 or 4 more, but if it's better on your end, that's fine.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share
Yeah.
that for you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. No problem. So next time I'll just unplug the other 2 monitors. All right. Okay. So as I was just mentioning, within the platform and the way the process works from conceptualization all the way through the research study and eventual publication, is that there are many artifacts here that are, one, enables knowledge management, information management. There's curation here. There's also, it's through the use of generative AI, being able to go ahead and synthesize what happens throughout this entire platform. You can advance, Nora. So a few examples of what I've been doing with 10 of the REDCap surveys that's part of the application. So that's step number 2. And we'll go back. And yeah, just for transparency, just wanted to say that I've been using the Vanderbilt internal large language model, which is called Amplify. And I use the Claude 3.5 Sonnet at a temperature setting of 0.6. So yes, go ahead and advance. So my first prompt was to be able to, one, look at whether or not the applications fit what a learning healthcare mission. And I do this through the information scientist persona. so that I'll go in and ask whether or not it fits. And it agreed. So obviously all of these applications did go through study. So that kind of validates what the model perceived as well. And this is what themes that it brought about on whether or not, one, it understood what at least our learning health system, what it's based on, and then what these studies were also pertaining to. So it's good to know that there was some sort of a congruence here between the large language model and those applications and my prompts. Next slide. So from there, continuing on as the information scientist persona, I was asked it to look at whether or not there are possibilities of computable biomedical knowledge within these applications. And this is just the basic application. Of course, there's much richer data as we get through the process, but that's for another presentation or publication. So here, yes, it picked up that there are particular risk models available. There's EHR decision support available as well within the 10 submitted studies. So, next slide. And then from there, try to elaborate a little bit more on the chart and ask it questions about what exactly do you see within these studies that we can transfer from conceptualization through publication. So we did it here, but now if we want to be able to implement it, what exactly can we take from these studies to be able to bring in to the medical center? In addition, what I like about this is that I feel, without really, I guess, getting too deep into the woods about generalizability, but I think it's little synthesis like this that can also be able to determine, says, hey, this is what other institutions, not academic as well as non-academic, can begin to see if they have that type of infrastructure as well. So rather than having to go read a full article, maybe with little charts like this or synthesis tables that you can be able to see exactly what we can pull out from other literature. So here, once again, it did say that, yes, you have risk prediction models, protocols, data integration, automation, a lot of ER embedded tools, and risk prediction you'll see within many of our publications. And then there's BPAs as well as being able to standardize documentation. So next slide. And then lastly, pertaining to the theme, I had to say, well, hey, we know, what is it that the information scientists or librarians, what is it that we can contribute to do with learning health systems? I mean, if of course, if it's applicable, we do understand that not all institutions are the same, but information is there. That's what drew me to this and the discussions with one of the directors, is that I saw a role of information science and I saw a role of the library just because of the information involved. And with that, being able to go in and saying that, hey, there's a lot of data produced within this platform or within this, or what is now called the Center for Learning Healthcare. There's a lot of information. Being able to help them curate the various applications and information artifacts within the Center for Learning Healthcare. Being able to, one of the nice things about using generative AI is that you can take a consumer health educator persona and be able to translate one of these applications or even a publication and say, hey, well, this is at a level that patients can understand of what exactly a learning healthcare system is. Because if you give a patient the definition of a learning healthcare, that's probably going to go over their heads. But can we bring it down to a consumer health level? Also, governance, information policy. I think just about every librarian on this planet took some sort of a policy class, how to be able to go in and govern and manage the amount of artifacts that are existed with and produced by a learning healthcare system. So, and next slide. I think I'm just about done. Yes. I can't say enough about our learning healthcare community here. And I mean, as I say, I've been a part of this for the last 8 years, have grown professionally, have engaged with so many people, and being able to find different things that not only that I can be involved with, but my staff can be involved with. It just helping the overall perception of the library as well. So I have to give a lot of credit to Dr. Cheryl Gatto, who is now one of the co-directors of the Center for Learning Healthcare, and the Senior Health Services Analyst, Grace Van Winkle, for sharing the applications with me and just making me a part of the team here. So thank you. I'll hand it over to Laura.
Thank you so much, Phil. And I'm gonna try to share my screen as well. And if I don't share the presentation slides, please, of course, let me know. Can everybody see my balloons? Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for inviting me today. I am quite honored to be a part of this panel and to be a part of the conference. And I will just echo my other panelists and the support that we received from Josh and Nancy and Noor. And prepping for this was extraordinary, and I'm very grateful for that. I am here at the University of New Mexico Health Sciences Library and Informatics Center. Before I talk more directly about my work and involvement with AI, I want to provide a little bit of context for where I'm coming from. I was reminded in our discussions as panelists, prepping for this, that when you've seen one health sciences library, you've seen exactly one health sciences library. And thinking about that also from the context of an academic health center, how different these organizations can look and the communities that we serve. And so wanted to provide what is some feedback or some broader kind of context for New Mexico. We are, the University of New Mexico is located in this sort of squatty rectangular county right in here. We are home to diverse communities. We are a minority majority state. Much of our population is made up of Hispanics or descendants of. We also have a number of tribal communities, 19 Pueblos, the Navajo Nation being one of the largest, and then of course 2 Apache tribes as well. And so that makes up for what is a very culturally rich and diverse kinds of communities. And then there's these healthcare challenges that come along with our state. We are spread out, and geographically there can be miles and miles between a clinic to the next. That there is a shortage in providers in our state. I think that is a bit broader than just our state, of course. And then retention issues that we continue to have to deal with within the state. And as a result, really health equity and this idea of workforce development is really key to our academic health center. And as a result, then also to our health sciences library and how we think about our services and how we serve our community. The one county that is not in a shortage and is not medically underserved is Los Alamos. It's that very small county up there at the top. And I'm sure if you remember your history lessons, went to the movies in the last couple of years, that is home of where the atomic bomb was created in World War II, and still home to the Los Alamos National Labs. So I'm going to keep moving forward. As we're talking about this, the Health Sciences Library is the only publicly accessible library for the state for health sciences. So we serve our local clinicians, our faculty, our students here on campus, but we also serve the broader community in providing access to health information. Really bridging that knowledge gap is one of our mandates for providing equitable access, or that sort of being one of our goals. advancing literacy, of course, in the state, and that emerging AI literacy. Certainly when you talk about workforce development in the space of AI, I think it's important to acknowledge that we are all learners in this space as it continues to develop and become more and more part of our everyday sort of fabric of existence. I'm going to talk about some of the research projects that I've been working on and share what is some snapshots of the results that came out of those studies. So I've been the co-PI for an Ithaca SR study, making AI generative for higher education. It started in 2023. We're in the last little bit of it. I think we're in the last 9 months of this particular study. And the study itself was aimed to looking at those existing and emerging uses of AI in higher ed. And then with that sort of aim or focus towards strategies or policies or programs for universities and how to sort of deal with, use the word that Ithaca used is harness AI technologies. I'm not sure that's possible to harness sort of from a philosophical perspective, but I think that's probably the best way to describe what the goal of that study was. The design of it is 19 institutions across North America, UNM being one of those institutions in which we did the study. Each of these universities then conducted 15 to 20 semi-structured interviews with faculty and scholars during the last year. So it was actually last spring that we conducted our 20 interviews for UNM. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a snapshot of what our health sciences faculty reported back from those interviews. So the structure of the interviews themselves was looking at teaching and learning, how faculty were really thinking about embracing that in their classrooms, in their teaching, also in research, and then in service or administration. So really that more traditional idea of that three-legged stool for faculty and how we think about AI within those. So this is just some examples of what came out of each of those across those interviews for health sciences. I will note that if you were thinking about it from an Everett Rogers diffusion of innovation, that bell curve, and thinking about how people go about adopting, our health sciences faculty were innovators to probably early majority adopters. There was really nobody in that bottom part of the bell curve. And so it looked a little bit different when you think about the population itself. So they were using it to generate code, really redesigning test questions or simulation scenarios for their students. There was really some deep thinking about how to redesign assignments towards more critical thinking. And these were specifically those types of assignments that really a generative AI tool can do. So if you were asking them to summarize an article for, a journal club or something like that, really your generative AI tool can probably do that and do it at least at a C level, maybe a B level. But really trying to think about how do you redesign those types of assignments for a deeper learning experience. One example that came out of our College of Nursing interview was writing assignments and really thinking about them more in presentation video kind of mode, and that deeper learning that students may need to go through if they are having to practice and put together their slide decks, and think about how do you teach that to your fellow students. And then I emphasize this one thing, and it's really teaching towards practice. And that came up over and over again in all of our health sciences interviews, and to some degree in other professions as well. So specifically in those other, what would you maybe consider professional kinds of degrees, like business or architecture, law, where there is this idea of how do you teach learners for the field that they enter, and not necessarily what is currently in practice in the clinical care. And so over and over again, there was this idea of how do you teach towards practice? How do you prepare learners to be ready for tomorrow. And then there's some examples of research kinds of ways that they wanted to use AI tools in their research. Everything from brainstorming, organizing thoughts, all the way to building an LLM specific towards biomedical sciences. That was one of our innovators in this space, and we did have two, one of them who has been involved in the AI space since the 1990s. So the perspectives were quite different when you started to look at innovators versus those that are sort of maybe early at adopting AI technologies. There was, of course, a number of challenges that were brought up. These are specific, again, for the health sciences interviews that were brought up. And I heard a lot of these actually in this conference, so I don't think anything here is going to be revolutionary. Equity of access, the free versus paid, and that was specific towards learners. UNM does not have what is an AI tool that we're providing across the institution. There was concern, of course, about the variation and how AI is adopted in different disciplines, and that leading to gaps. There certainly were concerns about AI perpetuating bias and racism. That was specific towards health sciences when that was brought up as well, and how that can create more disparities in healthcare as well. And then within that research space, really the policy and regulations may lag behind the capabilities of AI. There was this acknowledgement that AI tools keep on moving forward at their own pace, and our regulations may or may not keep pace. Specifically, the person was mentioning NIH policy about peer review and that not being allowable. So AI was also mentioned that it's not robust enough. It doesn't necessarily have the knowledge base, the subject specialty to, and or the complete information to be able to automate certain types of functions in research. There are concerns towards reproducibility and the reliability of the information. Critical thinking, of course, was brought up. Academic integrity always gets brought up in these types of conversations when you start talking about it within a higher education institution. And then the impact on critical thinking, and I definitely heard something about this yesterday, and just that over-reliance and how we may lose some originality or creativity was what was being expressed. One of our innovators that didn't make it to the slide also mentioned how really for-profit institutions are leading the way, and his desire or concern that really universities, not-for-profits, need to also be involved in this for what is a greater good and not just a profit kind of industry. So another study that I did is this mini ChatGPT study. It was very local, so just to my library for testing out the utility of ChatGPT 4. At the time, that was the model that ChatGPT had in its pro version, and it was just open to the faculty and staff here at the library to just have it as an open sandbox to test it, to explore, learn, innovate, and see what might come of that. So we assembled a research team, did a formal study on this. What it ended up looking like is a pre and post test of the ChatGPT study. We had 15 participants, and just for a frame of reference, we have only 25 employees in the library, so we had a very large number of employees that decided to join in on this sandbox kind of pre and post test study. Most of our participants, just as a baseline of this familiarity, you can see that most were not familiar, only slightly familiar with the tool itself. And over the course of that 6 months, you see it flip, the light green being the pre-test and the dark green being the post-test. So everybody moves from where they were to moderately to that very familiar or moderately familiar kind of space. And likewise with expertise in that, moving from being novice or advanced beginners towards being proficient or being competent in use of the tool. We also saw a shift in use across our library staff and faculty. At the front end of it, in the pretest, we asked what were the anticipated uses? What would they want to explore using ChatGPT for? And then towards the end of that, what they actually did and sort of where it may have been fruitful and where it may not have been. And you can really see that writing and correspondence ended up being the largest, and sort of predictably so was the largest area. But we also see that that the anticipated use of things like research methods and instructional practices and project management was a little less than what was actually used. And so we see a little bit higher in the actual use versus the anticipated use. We also see it moving the opposite way in a few of these, such as data analysis. There was a bit more of a interest in doing it, and you can kind of see that the participants found it a little bit less useful or had less time to do it. And I think there's probably some different challenges that might have occurred there with users or participants. And you can also see some unexpected uses of it. Translating is a fabulous thing, using these tools to translate something to another language. I personally used it to answer a question for an article that was written in Portuguese where I don't have the language skills. So there's some great ways in which you can use these tools to really be able to pull out necessary information to be able to provide some guidance. Meeting transcriptions, things like that. And then you also see an evolution of concerns. Really at the front end of the survey, at the front end of it, there was a lot of concerns towards what was described as hallucinations, reliability of it, ethical sort of considerations towards using these, concerns over privacy and transparency. And while I think every single one of these concerns remained, there's sort of a different expression towards the post-test about what their concerns were. By understanding the limitations of the system a little bit better, they articulated their concerns a little bit differently on the back end of it as well. Again, transparency was probably one of the bigger concerns, as well as privacy, and just those ethical kinds of considerations as well. And then we finally, I'm almost done actually, so I think I talked really fast. Our AI Crossroads, this is a community of practice. We host this for the entire campus, really. Anybody is welcome to join us. It is for the health sciences campus in particular, so faculty, staff, students from all of the 4 colleges and our teaching hospitals to join in on this discussion about use of AI in their work. Oftentimes we have guest presenters in this space as well. We have a student, or one of our grad students will actually be presenting on it next month, excuse me. He'll be talking about his own work, his own research in this space. He did a fellowship with me last fall for looking at AI literacy in his program and for the campus, and giving some guidance on good use of these LLMs and how students and faculty can approach the use of these kinds of tools. But we also talk about how to search the literature, how to use tools such as Elicit, Consensus, Research Rabbit, Cite are all some of the ones that we've talked about. And we have guest presenters also to come and talk about their research and how they're thinking about integrating AI into their workflow. And so just sort of more in the sort of trying to summarize all of this and put this back into that context, I do think libraries do bridge that gap, right, of knowledge. Equitable access to information really is very important. We probably only have to think of recent events to kind of think about how scary it is to think about information not being accessible, not being available where you have relied on it in the past. There are certainly challenges and as well as those opportunities that come along with AI and how it's being integrated into so much of what we're talking about. I sort of slid past this, this idea, and I'm making an assumption that, of course, all of us know publishers are integrating this into their content. The idea of what is format, I think, is sort of a bigger question when you think about reference books versus going to an LLM and what that might look like in the future. And then really just rethinking the role of libraries from that more traditional information access point to AI-powered hubs. And I will just leave with this. I don't necessarily have a full-on answer for this question, but I'm trying to ask something that might be a bit more provocative of how do we ensure that AI and knowledge sharing efforts truly serve diverse communities. So with that, I will thank you. And I think we're opening up for questions.
Yes, so thank you to all of our presenters. And I just want to, I think I speak for everyone when I say, wow, just wow. So thank you to Bart, Philip, and Laura for accepting our invitation to present. I think you've brilliantly illustrated and proved our point, which is librarians belong in the MCBK space. And like my co-host Josh said earlier, we want you to think of MCBK as another professional home for you. Chuck Friedman, founder, one of the founders of MCBK, has been a champion all along for librarians being part of the community. And when we were thinking about this panel, he said, librarians have been doing this all along, so we'd like to hear from them as part of this meeting. And I know from working with Chuck for about 10 years now, that when he opens a door for you, walk through it. It will be a transformative experience. So we welcome everyone who would like to be part of this. And then I want to highlight just a couple of things from our presenters, and then we're going to open this up to questions. So write questions in chat or get ready to raise your hand if you have a question for our presenters. But Bart, I liked what you said in terms of interacting with researchers, that you have a conversation where you ask them what they need. And I think that's a great door opener for librarians getting to be part of partnership opportunities. Philip, you had a great list of ways that librarians can add value in the MCBK space. And then Laura, so much great information about AI, but I also want to call out that you referenced Everett Rogers and diffusion of innovation, and I love that theory. He is a former faculty member at the University of Michigan, so we think of him, his contributions fondly. And so with that, let's open it up to questions. So I'd love to hear, we have some in chat. I think, Nora, are you going to call out the questions in chat and then also see raised hands for people who'd like to ask questions?
Yeah, sure. So I do see there was a little bit of back and forth in the chat, so I just want to look for questions. So Jerry had asked, and this was directed to Laura, I'd like to hear more about the statement, workforce development is key to health equity. Could you say more about roles for libraries in that workforce development space? I'm thinking about capacity building.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. I think that is actually a pretty difficult question to answer in a short period of time, but I'm going to do my best to think about that in that sort of ecosystem and how libraries play a part in that. And you being in Arizona, I know that you know the Western state kind of, and how you can go miles and miles without seeing another community. So I think that's access to information is a key component within that, having access to what is evidence-based kind of information. How do we kind of come to those decisions in a clinical setting is certainly part of that. And yes, I do think that this goes towards capacity building when you're thinking about workforce development. When you're thinking about AI in all of this space, I think there's also this idea of retooling. What are people that are already in the field, and how do you bring them along with regards to AI and the use of AI in their own clinics or in their own practices, right? And so I think that there are a number of ways in which libraries play that key role in helping to address those questions, being collaborative partners in that kind of space. But we're also that with our learners that are on campus. And like I said at the front end, I think we're all learners in this space. We all kind of have to come together to understand what the capabilities of these tools are, what those limitations are, and then how do we serve those communities? I realize I'm not fully answering the question, because how do you get to the patient? I'm still staying in this back side of it, of the learner and in that development stage versus what that impact of the patient is. But I think if you're not prepared, you're not ready to do it, you're not part of that conversation, you don't have collaborative partners, it's very difficult to really see the improvements that are needed in health equity in a state like ours, the rural. But I think that there's other areas too. It's not just rural states that can be impacted by this. Jerry, did I even come close to answering your question?
Outstanding. You did an outstanding job. Thank you. We have to tee ourselves up to be ready. The retooling thing is key.
Can I add to that? It's just, it reminds me of, so workforce development, we have a scholars program like most CTSAs do. And there's this amazing woman, she's a pediatric GI doc. She's literally one of those human beings that you look at her and I feel like I've wasted my entire life. But she found out about the library because we were doing workforce development. We were training people based on our a la carte list. And she literally used every library service in the next year. We have a presentation studio. She made a video. We have a person that works with identity management. She was consulting with them. She used our data scientist. She eventually went on and got a master's in data science. We have people that are on publications with her and things like that. And I think one of the struggles that libraries have in terms of understanding how, what Laura is saying, getting down to, did you actually improve patient care? It's the same problem that medical schools have. Like, how do you tell that you taught a student this on this particular day actually saved a patient's life, 10 or 15 years later? And I think to some degree, we just have to trust that. But to me, a lot of the value is if we're selling, we're a library, we don't charge typically, but if we're selling services that people find value in and use, I think there's an inherent sort of assumption on the back end that this stuff will be used at some point that really does impact that patient care, things like that.
I see a question in the chat. Josh Richardson brought this up. He says, Bart raised issues with AI maybe using copyrighted content. I'd be interested to hear from him and others on ways that librarians might help monitor or mitigate AI-related copyright infringements of biomedical knowledge in their institutions and beyond.
I don't know if I have an answer here other than be very cautious. And in our particular case, on this one biography project, we literally had a dean come to us and they're like, hey, well, I want to know, can you produce biographies? Now, we're not historians. We don't typically write histories. We provide resources that other people come in and do that. But we thought it was an interesting use case. And, and for us, like there's this one former dean that worked at our School of Medicine 100 years ago or so, but he was a eugenicist, right? So if you get around even the copyright, like if you just took what was written about this particular individual in the press at the time it was written, he would probably seem like this wonderful guy, right? And he wasn't, to be honest. And so you have to be really careful about what data you're feeding these systems, because it's only going to emulate back what you get it. And we were also really surprised at the amount of plagiarism. And I think somebody else had this in the chat about, like, you feed it this and it's just going to give you back what you gave it. And so you have to be really careful about those models and you have to verify. It's not that I can just feed it and just trust it's going to give me stuff. I actually need to go back and and see, did it quote it right? Did it take the text and actually give me good content back, or did it manipulate some of the numbers that made it look different? And again, like I said, you can arbitrarily, like you can inadvertently put yourself in a liable situation because you've now taken this, you've trusted it, and I put it on the web as if it's true, and it turns out it's not. And I think that's the real education component for libraries and AI with our users. Same thing with coding. It's like you assume, like, you gave me good code. Maybe the code works, but maybe it's not efficient. Maybe it's bad code, but it looks like it works. And so it doesn't take away that you need to have some sort of domain subject matter expertise to actually validate the human validation on the end and say, yeah, this is good content or this is bad content. And I just feel that as libraries, we've been doing this for probably pre-internet, right? Like there's plenty of examples of looking like a journal article and chart junk and somebody having a chart that makes it look like it says one thing. And then you look at the methodology and you're like, oh, this is bad science. And I think libraries have a significant role in saying, this is good AI or this is bad AI, or here's a checklist of things that you should be looking for as the person that's going to use this information. Because if you use it, you're now part of that process and you kind of own some of that product, whether or not you generated it or not.
Yeah, now I'll just say that, I mean, I don't even know if you could scale the monitoring. I mean, it's the same thing that publishers are experiencing, and we're starting to see this in licensing language about not using licensed materials for training data. I guess I would lean more to the side of mitigation. I've seen it in my institution about setting policies on university, their internal model, as well as the medical center's model about what to put in. I mean, there have been specific policies about personnel data, FERPA, PHI, you name it, and to be able to educate people to understand if you're not using the internal models, as opposed to going out to ChatGPT, going out to Claude or Mistral or whatever, and being able to understand the difference between those two and the repercussions behind that. So there's been a huge amount of at least mitigation information and policy set forth to help with that. So Nancy, I was sorry to cut you off.
No. I'm glad you added. And let me, before I ask my question, I want to give Laura a chance if she wanted to respond to that, or if we're good to go. I'm going to call out my colleague Jerry Perry, and I hope this is okay with you, Jerry, that yesterday you posed an interesting issue in chat about a clinical experience, an experience you had in the clinical environment where a physician was using an AI tool that you were then not later able to see the AI produced information as part of your electronic health record. And so I just wondered if you might want to talk or ask a question about patients' rights and with AI. Or if not, I'll ask that question. Or if you want to share about the experience.
No, it was just really intriguing. I went in for a chronic problem that I'm having. I don't mind acknowledging that. And part of the interface was my being asked if I was okay with there being an AI-assisted tool to generate the notes from the session with the physician. And of course I was. I mean, I'm supportive of all of this, right? Um, and in the process, I had some questions, but I also realized in going through that experience that I didn't and I wouldn't have access to the recorded notes. And, of course, there's a little bit of a power dynamic there, right? I mean, my experience, my health, my notes, but not my notes, right? And that was fine. And I have a cordial relationship with the physician. It's not like it was a challenging problem. But it really did make me think in terms of the conversation we were having yesterday around AI governance, ethics, all of those things. And what is the role for patients and the voice for patients in this experience? And I know in our HEAL work group, we've talked about it in the past. And in fact, it came up earlier today. We were having a really interesting session. I did an MCBK presentation to a Boston group that focuses on leadership in libraries. And that whole issue around patient advocacy and the role and the voice of patients came up. And I was asked, well, what are you doing to solve for that? And aside from experiencing that that problem, you know, and that power dynamic issue, I couldn't say that we were doing much yet, but I promised I would bring it up at this meeting. We really do have to work in our community around the agency question and the patient's experience.
Thank you, Jerry. And that is the point that I was hoping that you would bring up, that we as librarians have a role in terms of AI, and patients as stakeholders, patients as an empowered group here, and being at the intersection with AI in the clinical environment, and what we can, the value add that we could add, that we could have for patients, that patient perspective. Any other questions? We have, I think, still have a few minutes, so opening it up to the group. Please don't be shy. If you have a question, write it in chat, or raise your hand. We'd love to hear from the librarians in the session here.
Well, Nancy, I'll just go ahead and fill some air here. Going back to the article, I mean, one of my favorite lines was just about, the library and information science community being boundary spanners. Now, there are going to be limitations. Everyone's not going to be involved with the EHR. We probably can't understand most risk prediction models anyway. But I will say everything, whatever you can do in the upstream from EHR integration, all the way through. I think about my learning management system here with the School of Medicine. So they use Moodle. It's highly customized, but you begin to think, what is computable within the student medical record? What is computable within looking for outcomes and objectives and student learning too? So I would, you can think about computable data, information, knowledge, that spectrum, and all the technology that's in our institution. So if there is somehow, some way, just listen out, ask, and just figure out how to be involved in that information spectrum in your institution, because it's there.
Thank you.
Nancy, I wonder if I could make a comment.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for the nice things you said about me a little while ago. I really appreciate that. But I do want to make a comment about why I think librarians and librarianship are so important to MCBK. I've, in many places, raised my own concerns about large language models and the fact that I think they have good potential for burning up the planet. And also, I'm an old-fashioned AI person. I believe in problem-specific models. And I asked that question yesterday of the panel, and they all agreed that problem-specific models or goal-oriented AI is still very, very important, and do not believe a tsunami will overwhelm of large language models will overwhelm goal-directed AI. If you think about goal-directed AI and the models in computable form that they require, if they're going to be managed and if they're going to be fair and trusted, who knows how to manage that knowledge? Just because it's in computable form doesn't change the fact that it's knowledge represented, and knowledge that has to be represented using the ethics and methods that librarians have been using, every librarian is trained to use, and have been using for decades, if not centuries. So in addition to all the other reasons that have been mentioned, to the extent that we are going to package computable knowledge, including goal-directed AI machine learning models, librarians are absolutely essential if we're going to properly manage these models and enable them to be fair and trusted. So I welcome this panel, and I certainly believe that we can't get where we want to go without the full participation, support, and input from the health library community.
Thank you, Chuck. So, and like I said, Chuck has been a champion for having librarians in his space from the beginning, from the first time I met him. So, so, so we're, I think we're almost at time for moving on to our next presentation. I want to thank you all again, Laura, Bart, Philip. It's meant so much to have your input here. Really appreciate it. So many thanks, much gratitude.